People can find out a lot of information about it at orphanmyth.org. But basically, they believe that every child has the right to belong in a family. And first of all, they're dispelling, myths. Like a lot of people have misconceptions of what an orphan is. Is that, people think that kids in orphanages have no family or no parents. They think there are no orphans in the United States, and that, the problem with kids in foster care is not solvable. So first of all, this organization is trying to dispel those myths. Children are often living in institution as a result of poverty, and as many as 80% have a living parent or relative in the community who could care for them if they had the right support. There's over 420,000 children in the United States foster care system. The majority of them need a loving foster family while they wait to return to their biological families. 100,000 will never be able to return home and are waiting to be adopted. So that's 100,000 kids in the United States.
Hello and welcome to an all-new episode of the Hope Strategy Podcast, episode 3 of the Orphan Myth miniseries. So far, things have gone so well with these interviews, and this conversation with Shantel Kilnger did not disappoint. Shantel is an Emmy Award-winning television producer, media strategist, writer, innovator, mentor, and people connector. She's a creative force who spent most of the last decade producing thought-provoking television shows and events all around the globe for Oprah Winfrey. You may have heard of her. Prior to Harpo Studios and Harpo Productions, Shantel held supervising producer positions on popular daytime and primetime shows at other stellar companies such as Paramount Pictures, Warner Brothers, NBC Universal, Fox, and Fremantle Media. She is a trusted and respected media professional with a strong moral compass and sense of humor. A master storyteller able to capture attention, appeal with an edge, and captivate audiences with integrity. Shantel possesses a vivid imagination along with an immense contact base, including national and international media members, publicists, newsmakers, celebrities, and thought leaders. My conversation with Shantel was so great. We talked all about her background and her experience, starting in the early days, like the very beginning of CNN, where she worked at CNN Espanol, or the Spanish version for CNN, as an intern, and then worked her way up, and then got different production positions at all of these different shows and really what was a very different era of TV, where some of these daytime shows were getting really popular and were really growing. She played a pivotal, albeit sometimes behind the scenes role on the production side of things, role in so much of television history over the last, 20 plus years. And then had the incredible opportunity to work directly with and produce the Oprah Winfrey Show, and then go through the transition from when Oprah stopped her show and moved to her own double entendre there, but own production company, and started with Super Soul Sundays. And man, just an absolute professional expert. She knows everything and everyone in the world of TV and production. And it's such a cool conversation. It was such a pleasure to get to know her. We also talked about her upbringing and then also some more specific recent personal, events that I had never heard of, where she's from in Iowa, where there were these huge storms that really just wiped out, so like acres and acres, thousands and thousands of acres of farmland and homes, and just real devastation there that nobody really heard about because it happened last year when COVID and a presidential election was really just top of every single news story. So a lot of this stuff didn't ever get talked about very much. And so she really wanted to shed some light on that. And I'm glad that she did. And then obviously we talked a ton about the orphan myth, and how she got involved, and, what her role is with the whole thing. And such a great person to know, and such a great conversation to have. I'm excited for everybody to hear this one. Please enjoy this conversation with Shantel Kilnger. If you've been listening to the podcast for a while, you've heard me and Josh talk about MWI, which is our digital marketing agency. If you're new around here, this may be a first introduction to MWI. We're a full-service digital marketing agency that specializes in everything from website design and development to search engine optimization and all forms of paid advertising, whether it's paid social advertising or paid search advertising, content marketing, digital PR, social media management. Basically anything a business needs to strengthen and grow their digital footprint is what we do over at MWI. The website is mwi.com. And for any listeners of the Hope Strategy podcast, I'd love to offer a free 20-minute consultation with yours truly to talk about your business, to talk about your goals, to understand, what you need to be doing from a digital marketing strategy and action plan standpoint in order to yield some results and grow your business online. So please reach out at mwi.com/hope strategy. That's mwi.com/hope strategy to sign up, and we will be in touch. Now back to the show.
Something is happening in our world.
Time is very precious.
I'm gonna show you how great I am.
Hope in the face of difficulty.
More than machinery, we need humanity.
Hope in the face of uncertainty.
I'm better now than I was. I'm experienced now.
Changing the world can happen anywhere, and anyone can do it.
The audacity of hope.
This is the Hope Strategy Podcast with Corey Blake and Josh Steinley. I'm so intrigued by just the trajectory of you, this girl from Iowa that then went on to, and again, we talked before I started recording here a second ago about how you're like, just kind of looking at what I've done, like in my own head, it's like, oh yeah, I've just been working really hard and I've done some cool stuff. But then when you take a second to look at the pictures or look at the, the things, the accolades and things that have happened, you can kind of appreciate, oh geez, this has kind of been a lot. So I'm so interested in this, the trajectory and we're not talking, we'll get into all this, but we're not talking like, oh, you went on to be moderately successful in X, Y, or Z. It's like, no, you were an associate producer for Oprah. Then you were a producer for Oprah. Then you did this whole transition to the OWN network and produced Super Soul Sunday, which we got a whole thing to talk about there because I'm a huge fan of that. My wife is incredibly jealous of me right now. We'll talk about that too, this whole Oprah connection, which everybody has an Oprah connection. If you don't, anybody that's lived in the last 30 years has an Oprah connection. But so just tell me a little bit about, and there's going to be an arc here where we come back to Iowa a little bit later, and we're going to talk about why you're back there now. But tell me a little bit about what growing up was like, where you grew up, and then we'll transition that kind of into, the next steps and how you got into the career that you got into and stuff. But what was your upbringing like where you grew up there in Iowa?
Yeah, so I grew up in Cedar Rapids, Iowa, and it's interesting. Everybody, when they say you're from Iowa, they say, did you live on a farm? And I said, no, I did not live on a farm, but I now have a stepdad and a step family. They're very successful farmers. But as a kid, my parents got divorced when I was about 5 years old. Love them both to death. They are both my mom is my biggest cheerleader. I think she is still shocked to this day that I have moved around so many times, chasing one job after another. She would tell you, I've moved her probably 23 times, which is true. She has never held me back. My dad, has always been the one, no matter, I shouldn't say how old I am, but I was born, back when the phone was still connected to the wall in high school and we didn't have all these devices like we do now. But he has always said to me, you can't make a mistake at your age, so when it comes to moving across the country for one job or another, my parents have always been, my biggest cheerleaders, and I'm very grateful for that. And
that is a sweet dad line. I'm gonna have to remember that as a dad to
is it? Yeah. And it's funny. Sometimes my friends will say to me, do you remember when your dad used to tell us? And I'm like, oh yeah, he did, didn't he? And, I think I remember actually, it's interesting. I was thinking about this when my mom and dad got divorced. I remember he gave me a little recorder, a tape recorder. And I remember I'd tape little messages and then I'd send him the audio tape and tell him what I was doing that week. And I think that probably started, my, interest in journalism or whatnot. I also remember in high school, I had a teacher named Mr. Mead. And in English class one day, he brought a camera and we could pretend like we were reporters or something. I vividly remember that. So all through college, I went to the University of Iowa, go Hawkeyes, and I studied communications and journalism. And I always thought that I would end up being a reporter one day. And I think, I was thinking back on my trajectory. Somehow later in life, I'll tell you, I had another boss 3 years down the road. The first time she came into my office, she said, now I want you to do this and this and book this person on this show and this and that and MIH. And she walked out of the room and I looked at my associate producer and I'm like, MIH, what is that? And she said, make it happen. Like, we got to make it happen, So I kind of have had that motivation throughout my entire career since then, that if you want something, if you're going for something, MIH, make it happen. But I will go back to, I'm at the University of Iowa and I thought, gosh, I need an internship. And what am I going to do to advance my journalism career? So I called the local KGAN Channel 2 News in Cedar Rapids, Iowa. Their station was right across from my dad's law office. And a wonderful man named Daryl Adams answered the phone. And I said, hey, my name's Shantel and I go to Iowa. And I was wondering, I want to be an intern. And he said, well, we don't have an intern. We've never had an intern. I was like, well, I really want to be an intern, So, next thing you know, I think I had a 2-day-a-week internship. And I thought I was so cool driving the KGAN station wagon around town. And fast forward to my senior year in college. And I learned that I am 3 credits short of graduating. And I think, oh, my parents are going to have a cow.
That's the nightmare that most people have. Like 2 years after they graduate, they're still having the nightmare. I had that dream after I graduated of like, oh no, I missed a class and I never graduated. I've heard that a lot of people have had that. You actually had it.
Oh, that's a very common dream. I have a friend who was a dream expert before she passed away. And that is a very common dream. Like I have the dream where, well, this is terrible too. I will tell you, back in the day, I planned my college classes and my schedules around laying out and getting a suntan, which is really embarrassing to say. Yeah, if a class was on a Friday, I didn't take it. The dream is very common. I have this dream all the time that I wake up and it's finals week and I have no idea where my classes are because I haven't been because I've been laying out in the sun and I'm trying to find the registrar's office to find out where my final is because I haven't been there. And supposedly that is one of the most common dreams, like being late for class.
That goes to show like the amount of stress you're under as a student, because I had that dream for a long time where it was like, I was trying to find the class and it's like, I don't know where it is. I don't even remember signing up for this, but I didn't take it.
It's the same dream. Yes. So basically I think, oh my gosh, my parents are just going to be so upset. I can't graduate. I'm 3 credits short. Well, thank goodness one of my friends at Iowa, and her name was Melissa Kenny, she had done an internship through a program called the Washington Center. And I don't think it's unique to the University of Iowa. All different colleges have this program. And I signed up and I got an internship at CNN in Washington, D.C.
Oh, wow.
So this would have been 1989 when CNN was I don't know how many years they had been on there, but still starting. This is when interns were running the studio cameras. Like they would be, running the cameras, and then every once in a while somebody would faint and the camera would go up to the air and, all sorts of stuff like that. But I got an internship for CNN Spanish. I spoke Spanglish at best. It was myself, my friend Carrie.
Did you just take that in school?
So I took 3 years of Spanish in high school.
Okay. If
you took 4, you didn't have to take it in college. It was really hard. I don't know why I didn't latch onto it. That actually, I would say that is one of my biggest regrets in life, that I do not speak 3 or 4 languages, considering the friends that I have and all the languages that people speak. So if I could give, young people advice, I would say learn a different language. I mean, I'm tangenting again. I have a niece and a nephew who are, 5 and 6, and their grandparents are Chinese and they speak Chinese, English. My niece is learning French already. I mean, they're just sponges.
That's
as
awesome.
little kids. And so basically it was myself, another intern named Al Ward. He has an awesome production company in Boston called A Ward Productions. I mean, how is that for a great name? My friend Carrie, who was the producer at the time out of college. And then Jay McMichael was the cameraman for for CNN Spanish at the time. And he's someone you would love to talk to too. He is still there. He's a White House cameraman, and he's been with every president, followed every president.
Goodness gracious. I'm gonna take
amazing
What's his
story.
name?
Oh yeah, I would love Jay McMichael. You would love to talk to him. He has so many stories to tell. But so anyway, it's the four of us and the wonderful correspondent Marlene Fernandez. And she was so giving of us in this internship opportunity that she would send myself and Al out into the field to ask senators and congressmen and celebrities, whatnot. We'd ask questions that she'd want to know, like in English, and they'd answer us in Spanish. And then we'd pray to God that we got the right answer that she wanted and bring the tape back to her. And so it was an incredible internship. It was 3 months. And after that, I was back in Iowa for the holidays and, thinking, what the heck am I going to do with my life? And I get a letter in the mail from a lovely lady named Diane Stanley. I'll never remember it, offering me a job at CNN for $12,500 a year. And could I start in 2 weeks? And, my dad was like, oh, this is awesome. Go for it. And my mom's like, wait, what? You're moving to Washington, D.C.? We're from Iowa. And, she had never been to D.C. and it was, a kind of scary thing. But yeah, I packed my bags, ended up in D.C. I started out as the receptionist on the 2 to 10 p.m. shift. Part of my job at that time, answering the phones, was during Larry King Live. That was in the day where all the phone calls for his show had to go through the switchboard, and I had to send them through. So it was an interesting time, trying to navigate who should be sent through, who shouldn't, or whatnot. And then I ended up in the tape library, where literally tapes of everything that any editor would use in their show would live. My job for several years was literally logging videotapes of President George Bush Sr. and then Bill Clinton, walk to Air Force One, pet their dog, hug Barbara, everything. Like, I'd log all these tapes.
Would they, like anybody that was out recording, they would just bring all the tapes in and then you had to label them and
they're like little tapes, and I'd have to sit, basically these tapes had come in, we'd put them in a little machine, and I'd sit there and just watch them and handwrite on the cases at 0030, GB walks to Air Force One, 0035, and so
anybody out there doing video today, count your blessings that you,
my gosh, it is
click and drag it and drop it into a folder. And
exactly. And then the other thing is, so then my job progressed to, each night for say the 6 o'clock news, there would be 6 editors. And by, usually about 10 o'clock that morning, they would know what their piece would be for that night. And then they would hand me a piece of paper saying, I need video of, U.S. Air Force planes. I need video of, whatever it was. And it would be my job to scour this library of thousands and thousands of tapes.
So you would have to by hand and I go find B-roll.
Yes, go find them and bring them a stack of, 20
That's
tapes,
amazing.
To each editor. And then literally, it was literally like broadcast, Holly Hunter movie is a broadcast news where she's running down the hallway with the tape. That happened pretty much every day. Either myself or one of the other production assistants would be like racing down the hallway, slamming the piece into the machine, 30 seconds before it's going to air on live TV. When I think back on that job, I started out at, like I said, at $12,500. I think by the time I was at CNN for 4 years, I think I was up to $30,000 a year. But the experiences I had, they let you do, you could volunteer yourself to do anything. Like, I would get done with my shift and I would go up to the assignment desk and say, what can I help with today? And so. Well,
that's an incredible, just an incredible moment in history too, because the 24-hour news cycle that we have now, we just think, oh yeah, it's always been that way, but it wasn't that way. And to think for anybody that, that's been around for not, the last 20 years or whatever, to think that CNN, well, no, I'm saying for me even, to think CNN at one point was a startup where you had interns running the camera and you had interns doing, what an incredible moment. And then also to be like that close as in the media to these presidencies and having to, there was a lot going on.
Yeah. And then, I was there, we all were, there were all of us that worked there. And what I love about it, actually, there's probably 50% of the people who were there when I was there that are still there, like Sam Feist, who's the bureau chief, we were interns together. Wow. I mean, it was really interesting, but it was also during the Gulf War. So that was another thing too, where, the bomb dogs would come in every day and sniff around. We were worried about Bernard Shaw and John Holloman, who's passed away sadly many years ago, Peter Arnett, all over there, in that war. I mean, it's really surreal to think about that time. And like I said, I did everything from floor direct the Jesse Jackson show to Capital Gang, Evans and Novak. My dear friend Cindy Morey, who has a huge job with Oprah and OWN and Discovery. She was the producer on the Capital Gang and whatnot. And if she'd go on vacation or she'd be sick, I'd get to fill in. I mean, it was an amazing experience when I look back at it. Even like I was at the White House all the time. I mean, I think about those press briefings and we just like willy-nilly go in there. I'd stand up at the podium to white balance the cameras, with my friend Jay, who's still there, play with, Bill Clinton's cat Socks was in a tree one day. We were coaxing it out. I think Millie, George Bush Sr.'s dog, would be running around. I mean, it's so surreal for me when I watch those White House briefings.
When I listen to these stories, when I talk to all these incredible people, you hear there's this kind of through line through everything. And we talk a lot about like grit and motivation or determination or like make it happen, MIH. It's funny because our team, we have an office in Hong Kong, and I used to go out there before COVID. I'd be out there 3 or 4 times a year. Mm-hmm. And as we were building the office and building the team out there, I didn't realize that I said, make it happen all the time. I just like part of my vernacular. I just, hey, get that done, make it happen. And so then like the 3rd or 4th trip out there, we had 4 or 5 employees at the time. And they started, when I'd walk into the room or when I first got there, they started saying like, hey, make it happen, make it happen. And then they made me realize that I say that all the time. So I'm a big MIH guy myself. It's easy to like gloss over, like, they didn't do internships, but I got the internship, like I walked in and I said, no, I'm going to be an intern. And then I go and I get this, my friend just happened to do this program. And so I applied for the program, and the next thing you know, I'm in CNN, and I don't speak Spanish very well, but I'm working for CNN Spanish. Like there's just this grit and like this work ethic that is a through line through so many successful people that have done such cool things. Where does that work ethic come from?
Yeah, I think I have to attribute it back to my Iowa roots. I don't know. Like, I feel like, I am really blessed to have grown up here. I think, people here are humble, they're hardworking, they're amazing. I think too, my stepdad was a superintendent of school system for a long time, and, taught me many lessons, made me mow the grass. I hated mowing the grass. Ugh, there's all this stuff, but I look at it now and I'm like, I grew up really grounded. My mom and my stepdad were very strict. I don't know. I'll tell you, I was thinking about this lesson a couple of weeks ago. It's ironic. I was a speed skater. I did not ice skate like my friends ice skated. My dad had speed skated when he was younger. And so I got a pair of speed skates. And so everybody was like, what is that? And what are you doing? So I'd be in these little speed skate, races around, and I don't even remember where it was in Cedar Rapids. But I remember one time I came in second, and I was really disappointed. And I said to my stepdad afterwards, he was there, and I said, oh my gosh, all I just kept thinking is, I don't remember what the girl's name who beat me. I just kept wishing that she would fall down. I just kept wishing she'd fall down, and he looked at me and said, that is not the way you need to look at this scenario. You need to think about, you wished you would have skated better or harder or faster. And then it's not about winning, it's about, being in the race. And, if you fall down, get back up, dust yourself off, like that is just, it was just, I remember that. So, and it brings me back, I don't want to circle Oprah back in here, but I had thought about some of my favorite quotes from her. And she said, one of her quotes is, it doesn't matter who you are or where you come from, the ability to triumph begins in you, And so I think
she's just chock full of amazing.
Oh, she's just chock full of them. I know. Right.
Are you a big goal setter? Like when you're looking at all this, do you plan ahead? Like say, okay, I want to go to Iowa, and then I want to
Not really. Things just, pop into my head and I'm like, oh, I want to do that. Or
are you really competitive like you were in the speed skating?
No, not at all. No, I think like I never have had that. I think maybe I compete against myself. I've never been like, I need to beat somebody else. I think that, I don't know. It's interesting. I think, well, I'm going to throw another quote out here in a second, but I think if we circle back to back to CNN, and I'm there for 4 years and I loved every minute of it, but it's 4 years and all my friends were back in the Midwest, most of my University of Iowa friends. So I apply to this Bertice Berry show, and she taught me one of the most important lessons in life. And she has a quote that says, when you walk with purpose, you collide with destiny. And when you find destiny, you find peace. And so, I'm coming from this news background, jumping into this talk show with this amazing woman with this amazing spirit, had won all these awards for comedy. She's a sociologist, has her PhD. And at the time she was actually, had just adopted her sister's 3 children because her sister had some substance abuse problems and the children were going to be, going into foster care. Yeah. So Bertice was just this amazing human being. It was an incredible experience. I'd never worked on a talk show before, and we did a lot of fun things. It was based in Chicago. So when she would come out, the audience would be all ready. And we had the announcer for the Chicago Bulls. I don't know if you've ever been to a Bulls game, but it would say, and now Bertice Berry, and she'd walk out, and it was just so much fun. And I was back in my element, and it was an amazing show, and we had a really, really great time. But, the talk show business is tough. Yeah. And, what I will say is I made so many lifelong friends on that show, and I'm still friends with Dr. Bertice Berry. I love her very much. But the show only ended up, it was for a year, and then it phased out.
So was this, what years was this then? I'm trying to think, like talk show.
This would have been like 93 to 94, I would say.
Okay. So who were the other talk shows at the time that were like?
Well, here's what I will tell you. I'm going to go into the story and how I ended up on my next latitude. So the show gets canceled, and I'm like, what is canceled? I came from news. I don't know what a show is canceled.
News doesn't get canceled. Yeah.
News doesn't get canceled. So at this point I'm thinking, well, it's summer. I'm going to hang out this summer with my friends and then figure out what I'm going to do. Maybe I'll apply to the Oprah show. I don't know. Like, it was never really my goal, like, oh, I have to be on the Oprah show. I mean, that's another story for like a little bit down the road. But so I'm literally laying in bed one day, like on a Monday morning, and my phone rings, and it's, hi, this is Amy from the Sally Jesse Raphael show. We got your resume. Wow. And can you fly to New York tomorrow for an interview? And I'm like, what? And I'm thinking, oh my gosh, well, some of my other friends from the Bertice Berry show have already moved to New York, and I'll just go for the free weekend and like see New York City. And, but I don't really want to move to New York right now. Well, I fly to New York and I have this interview, and Amy was very fun and bubbly and everything. And she called in my other dear friend now, Tom Sestaro, who was he booked all the travel then. And she said, Tom, you need to find her an apartment. She needs to move here and start working here in like 3 weeks. And I'm like, what is happening? What is happening?
What a whirlwind.
So anyway, what a whirlwind. So, and this is back in the day, it's really hard to get an apartment in New York City. I don't know if you know that. You kind of have to have a connection or pay a big finder's fee. It just so happened there was an apartment 2 blocks from the studio. I went through it. I was first on the list. I flew home. I called back that apartment building, lady the next day, and she's like, well, if you want that apartment, you have to fly back here to sign the lease. I'm like, what? Like, you can't just fax the lease. So anyway,
no DocuSign.
Anyway, but the Sally show was going to put me up for 2 months while I found a place. So instead they flew me back. I signed the lease and I started this job at the Sally show. I think that was like 95 or whatnot. And I was there for a year, and again, made amazing friends on that show. It was a very competitive time in the talk show world at that time. Like the Geraldo Rivera was across just the street, several different ones. And I worked for Sally. We just had a really cool Zoom with a lot of the Sally staff, probably about 2 months into COVID. And she is just a firecracker and just as amazing. And I just think the world of her and her big red glasses.
Yeah.
And
she still rocked the big red glasses?
She does. She does. She is
it.
a wonderful woman. But somehow, okay, so Mary Duffy, she was the executive producer of the Montel Williams show. And she called me and said, "Hey, you're an AP. I'll make you a producer. Do you want to come work for our show?" And I was like, "Okay." And so I went across the street, basically, had nice goodbyes with my friends at Sally and was able to still see them because they were right across the street. And Mary is the one that taught me the MIH. And it's interesting is at the time when she first said that to me, I was like, I was terrified by MIH. Oh my gosh, am I going to be able to, book this show or do what she wants to do or whatever. And it actually just energized me, I think, for the rest of my life. And again, this is a time where I'll never forget, we were doing, I think I was producing 2 or 3 hour-long shows a week, and there were no cell phones at the time. There were we didn't even have.
How many hours are you working a week to do?
Oh, like crazy. I mean, that's the thing, like crazy. I mean, around the clock, basically, running on adrenaline and coffee and candy bars. But this is how we booked guests, basically is, well, I'll go back to the Sally show. I'll never forget, like a show would air and across the bottom of the screen, it would say, "Okay, are you in a fight with your sister? Call 1-800 blah, blah, blah." So when you knew that your plug for guests was going to come up, you had to go down and answer that phone. And it would be like the phone would ring and you'd be like, "Hello." And all you'd go is, "What's your name? What's your number? I'll call you back. What's your name? What's your number? I'll call you back." Because you knew they were probably calling in about your show, but you didn't have time to find out what they wanted. You just take their number and then you'd have this list of like 30 numbers. And then you'd go back and call people and try to figure out who would fit in on your show. We had no voice. I mean, I don't even know how we did it, to tell you the truth. So then when I moved across the street to the Montel Williams show, we had these little digital pagers. And again, I think we'd run the plugs, and basically a lot of people who you'd want to book on the show didn't have the money to call long distance. So they would page us through these little digital, pager, but you'd get pages like they would call the 800 number, and then the operator would send us a message over this pager, and you'd get messages like, "Sally says," well, I shouldn't use Sally's name, "Betty says she's not going to get on the plane. Sorry." And you'd be like, "Oh," I mean, the fact that we got people to and from the shows, and I don't know, it was amazing. And Montel Williams I love him. He is also an amazing human. I mean, he is just, he has done so much for championing people. He is an amazing human, and he, so energized on that show, and we had so much fun. And literally I was working on his show. I think this would have been 1995 or 1996. And he won an Emmy for Best Talk Show Host. So we had a party with the 3 Paramount Pictures TV shows, Maury Povich Show, the Lisa Gibbons Show, and the Montel Williams Show, a post-Emmy party. And at that party, a woman named Nancy Alspaugh, who was the executive producer of the Lisa Gibbons Show, came up to me and said, it was so funny. I was standing there with her and Alex Williamson, who was the supervising producer at Montel. And Nancy said, "Shantel, you should move to LA and work for the Lisa Show." And Alex looked at her and he goes, "Oh, she's terrible. You don't want her."
It sounds like this is pretty, kind of cutthroat. Like you're doing good at one place, and then another place comes in and says, "Hey, we need somebody. Come on over. We'll pay you more."
Yeah, but it wasn't really like that. It was all in good fun. And I mean, I would say the whole, talk show world, it is very competitive. It is very competitive. And it is.
Is there a lot of turnover of like staff? I mean, is it?
Yes,
it sounds like
definitely. It's very, and it's very 24/7 because shows change, deadlines change. You need to hop on a plane tomorrow. You need to hop on a plane tomorrow, and you might be gone for 3 weeks.
And these shows are every single day. That's the thing too, is it's not like you're gearing up. I mean, again, this is like 1/1,000,000th literally of what these shows do. But like even doing a podcast where you release an episode once a week and you just have to do the conversation and do the edit, like that's just a lot of time consuming, but to imagine the team that has to organize, produce, edit, and then all of the engagement, whatever, like every single day. That is so much.
Yeah. And you have no idea. And I know we're skipping ahead, but like when I was on the Oprah Winfrey Show, you'd know what your show is, but people have no idea how much time and effort goes into 1 hour of television. We would spend weeks with 6 editors, especially like on Super Soul Sunday, Oprah's Next Chapter, heavily post-produced. We would go, you would pitch the guests. We're fast forwarding, but it would be stuff like, how fun would it be to go to Barbados and film with Rihanna because that's where she's from? And then, a month later, you're in Barbados with Rihanna.
Well, the cool thing about working with Oprah is that it's like, anything's possible, right? It's like, how cool would it be to do that? And it's like, well, let's make it happen. That's unbelievable.
I mean, literally, when I found myself on Oprah's Next Chapter, the show that she did after the Oprah Winfrey
and that was on,
show.
Was that the first show on the OWN network when that launched, or was it
Oprah's Next Chapter? I believe so. Gosh, and we're going back now, 5 years or so ago. But yeah, it was the show. Put it this way, there was other shows on the network, but it was the show that she was moving forward with because it was her next chapter. So the idea was, instead of being in the studio, we're going to be going out around the world and doing whatnot. So, there was probably on the Oprah Winfrey Show, I don't know, the staff was probably 500, maybe more. I don't know, between, there was probably, no, it's been a while ago, maybe 14 teams of six people on each production team. Yeah. So when we scaled down to the network and the Oprah's Next Chapter, I think there were 20 of us, maybe. Okay. I mean, not little. It was like, 6 teams of 2 or 2. Yeah. Every 200, 300 ideas pitched, one makes it through. I mean, we'd have to just, to get the right thing. And intention was always big with her. Whatever she does, there has to be an intention behind it. It's not just like, oh, you want me to interview this person? Why? There has to be something behind it. But, it's interesting. We all pitched a million ideas, and I am a big fan of Steven Tyler. And he was on People magazine at the time. And I was like, oh, I'm going to pitch Steven Tyler. Like, how cool would that be? Never in a million years dreaming that it would be the very first Oprah's Next Chapter shoot. We would go to Lake Sunapee, New Hampshire, where Steven grew up. And it ended up being 2 full-hour episodes for the premiere of Oprah's Next Chapter. And it was amazing. I mean, it was, and my friend Dave Rivera, who was like this, oh my gosh, you should interview him too. He did all
I'm keeping a
I mean, I have a whole list of.
I'm taking notes and I'm writing down all these names.
Keith Walker is like the DP who's been with Oprah and done every shoot since the beginning of time with her and is amazing. But, and then my friend Julie Simpson was my producer at the time, and Tara Montgomery is the head of OWN. And we were all in Lake Sunapee before Steven got to his childhood home, riding around in his Ford Ferritin. I'd never heard of a Ford Ferritin before, but we had to scout it and drive around in it because Steven was going to take Oprah for a ride in it the next day. So we arrived like a day before the shoot, and we're scouting and his lake home and what we're gonna do and everything. And I'm talking to his manager, I think at the time, I mean, because you're the whole day just talking about stuff, and I was like, oh my gosh, my mom loves Steven, like she loves American Idol and she has loved Steven, and whatever. It's just a type of a conversation. So the next morning we show up at Steven's childhood home, and it's the first day that he comes. He wasn't there for the scout day. And he comes right up to me and he's like, oh, Shantel, you're the one. He's like, where's your phone? And I was like, what? And he's like, let's call your mom. I hear your mom's a fan. And I'm thinking, Oprah's going to show up in like 15 minutes. Like, I'm going to be in big trouble.
Yeah.
Like,
where's Steven Tyler? Oh, he's over talking to Chantel's mom.
With my mom, I'm like, oh, that is so nice of you. Oh, let's do that later. Like, let's get ready. And, he's getting ready to do this awesome thing where he jumps off the balcony of, I think, the garage of his lake home into the water. And he was fixing us quinoa for breakfast because that was his favorite thing to eat. And I'd never heard of quinoa. Anyway, so fast forward, we tape and we take a lunch break, and I'm standing there, on the side, like my sandwich in my mouth. And Steven comes up to me. And I remember at the time I had one of those little red flip phones. I mean, this is before there was digital, whatever. Yeah. And he's like, let's call your mom. I'm like, oh my gosh. Okay. And so the next thing I know, like Steven is on the phone with my mom, having a full on conversation with my mom, blah, 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 and
was your mom freaking out? That's gotta be.
Yeah, and then George Burns, who is the amazing photographer who has been along. He's, oh my gosh, we all love George because all of us who have amazing pictures from our years at the Oprah Show, George Burns took all those pictures. He's traveled with Oprah, been a part of her team for forever, but he's standing there going, what's going on? You know, and I'm like,
Yeah.
you know, and it was just so funny. So then later we go back and we finish, you know, what became like 2 full-on hours of Steven Tyler and his amazing, incredible story. And as we're getting ready to leave, Steven says, how do you spell your mom's name? Because my mom's name is Laree and it's Loree. And he goes, okay. And he comes back and he didn't give me a book. He autographed a book for my mom. It was so funny. And you know, I'm like, this is so cool. You know, I mean, so that's the type of human he is. I don't know. So that was just one of many, and I know I've tangented because we were back at the Montel Williams show, and I know we skipped to Oprah, but so I can maybe fast forward Montel. So basically, so I'm at Montel Williams. I then I'd been in New York 2 years and I loved every minute of it, but New York is way different than Iowa and it's a rat race and everything. And I was like, oh, LA sounds good. So I went out and I worked on the Lisa Gibbons show. I love her. She's still a treasured friend at this point. I was there for 4 years. We did, you know, I did everything from all shows about, I was always the animal producer. I mean, I had on Air Buds puppies that were born through a sperm donor. I had the little dog Verdell from, was it As Good as It Gets with Jack Nicholson.
Okay.
I had oh my gosh, his name was Slammer. He's the little dog in Something About Mary. I mean, I was like, I've always been like the dog animal person, whatnot. So I was at the Lisa show for 4 years, loved it. My dad's wife, my stepmother, her name was Julie. She was a wonderful person. She was diagnosed in 1999 with terminal inoperable pancreatic cancer and given 3 months to live. And basically, so she's 10 years older than I am. And she was like, this isn't going to happen. I'm not going to go out like that. And believe it or not, she didn't pass away until 2014. She's on the record books at the Mayo Clinic, one of the longest living pancreatic cancer patients. Doctors would come from all over the world to study her. And she is really, truly my hero that always, you know, inspired me that, you know, live every day to the fullest. But anyway, so 1999, I'm in LA, I'm at the Lisa Gibbons show. She's diagnosed with pancreatic cancer. I want to get back closer to home. And my friend, Bruce McKay, who is now passed away, was the executive producer of the Judge Mathis court TV show in Chicago. And so he offered me a supervising producer position. I went and I worked on the Judge Mathis show for 4 seasons. Bo Banks is still the executive producer there. She's a wonderful woman. I think they're in I don't even know what season they're in. They're in season 20, I think now.
Yeah, it's been going on.
Which is crazy. So I was there for 4 years. And then another story for another tangent. I got married. I was in a very short-lived marriage to the wrong person, which is, I don't want to go into, but I ended up leaving Judge Mathis to go back to Los Angeles. I ended up in Los Angeles. The Bachelor was the same company as Judge Mathis. I ended up supervising producer on like the Men Tell All, Women Tell All, After the Final Rose, the studio live shows. I didn't have anything to do with the house and all that goes on in the house and all that stuff. So I did those shows. And that was way back. I don't know. They were like season 4 through season 8.
And they're in season like 30 now or something. Right?
They're, you know, and a lot of the same friends and everything still there, but they took a beat for a second. And I ended up, one of my executive producer, Donna Harrison, was one of the EPs at the Lisa show when I was on there. She said to me, hey, American Idol is starting a new show called American Idol Rewind. And they have realized that a lot of the people that they pre-tape for American Idol, Kelly Clarkson being one of them, she wasn't featured in the early shows because there's so many, you know, young budding artists in there that are, you know, coming up that they don't feature everybody. And then they realize, oh my gosh, we have all this great footage of Kelly Clarkson that's never aired. So let's do American Idol Rewind and air this footage. So long story short, I took the interview, but I'm sorry, I hadn't thought about this for a long time. Before I took the interview at Rewind, I was going through a divorce. I was short-lived marriage. It was a shock, whatnot. Everything happens for a reason, though. Like, it was a blessing in disguise. But my boss from Judge Mathis, Bo Banks, sent my resume to the Oprah Show without telling me. So I was literally in Las Vegas at a private Prince concert. He did these concerts where he'd start at like 11 o'clock at night and go till 4 o'clock.
You now officially need to write a book. Now that you've got a Prince story, it's official that you need to write a book.
Yeah. So I'm at this thing where there's like 200 people. It's all night long playing all these songs that, like, you know, you've never heard or whatnot. I come out, I'm eating breakfast with my dear friend, and I hear this message, and it's like, this is Susan Nash from the Oprah Show.
Oh, gosh.
Can you come for an interview? And I'm like, what? Oh my God. I'm like, I gotta go. I gotta leave Vegas. I gotta study. This is going to be hardcore. Like, I gotta study. I gotta know the Supreme Court justices. I gotta know what's going on in the world. You know, I gotta study for my interview.
And so there are very few people in the world that spent all night with Prince in a private concert, and then the next morning at breakfast get a call from Oprah. Like, you may in fact be the only person.
It wasn't from Oprah, but it wasn't
Oprah
from
Show.
Oprah herself.
It's okay.
I know.
Don't disqualify this moment that only you have ever had.
Here's the crazy thing, though. So I go for this interview, and they had told me, if you make it to the executive producer's office, you're probably going to get hired. You know, so I go there.
This is between Lisa and American Idol.
No. Okay. So I went from the Lisa Gibbons show to the Judge Mathis show.
Oh, sorry. Judge Mathis and then Bachelor.
Yeah. Judge Mathis, Chicago. So Lisa's in LA. I go to Judge Mathis in Chicago. 4 years there. I moved back to LA after I got married. I live in LA. I do Bachelor, American Idol. But what happened before I got to Idol, my former boss sent my resume to the Oprah Show. But what happened was they were going on their summer hiatus, and Oprah was taking the entire staff to Hawaii for 2 weeks. So after my interview, there was this lag of, am I going to get this job? Am I not going to get this job? So when I got the call for American Idol Rewind, I told the amazing EP, his name was Doug James, and he was with Fremantle. I said, listen, I'd like this job, but I had this interview with the Oprah Show, and my family's back in Chicago. It would mean a lot to me, so I'm not sure. And he said, listen, why don't you just start? We'll just see what happens and go from there. So it ended up, I think I ended up working, by the time I ended up getting the job and moving to Chicago, I think I was with American Idol Rewind about 8 weeks. And, it was all, they knew, and it was all, I was sad to leave them and everything, but all of a sudden I'm moving to the Oprah Show, and I'm moving across country, selling a house, moving into short-term living, going through a divorce, starting a new job, what else? Like all this stuff at the same time. Geez. It was a crazy, crazy thing. But I think about it and I'm like, oh my gosh, I don't know. I loved the Oprah Show. I watched the Oprah Show, but it hadn't been on my radar of like, I want to work for the Oprah Show. And so I don't know. I'm very blessed. I think about everything that I've been able to do and travel the world with her. I went to India for 3 weeks. It's like, when you think about it, when I sit here and think that I am this girl from Iowa and I've had so many pinch me moments, it's just unbelievable to me. It's like, I think about I got to work on her after Oscar parties at the Kodak Theater. When President Obama was inaugurated, my team went to DC and we did shows at the Kennedy Center with Mr. and Mrs. Biden and Seal and Bono and, all these people, Ashton Kutcher, all these, mix of people around the show. We did another show in DC where John Bon Jovi was one of the main guests. He was there for the inauguration.
This is a really basic question, but just curious, having been around so many celebrities and stuff, what do you eventually get used to? Is it more of a professional thing for you because you're so in go mode, or is there anybody that you met that you were like, oh my gosh, that it was hard to keep.
It's so interesting. It's so interesting. I don't know. I'd get starstruck by the people like, say, Florence Henderson or somebody that I grew up with, that it's somebody like, oh my gosh, I grew up with that person. I'll have to tell you, Shonda Rhimes was one that I was like, oh my gosh, Grey's Anatomy was out and awesome. I love that. Her brain and her creative process and everything. And she was a guest on Oprah's Super Soul Sunday. And actually, does your wife know that you can watch those episodes online? It's like owntv.com, and if you just Google Super Soul Sunday, you can watch all the episodes.
Yeah, she does. And she listens
online
to the podcast too. That's like, is it Super Soul? What's the podcast called? Is it Super Soul Sunday? Is that the podcast as well? Or does she do a separate podcast?
Oh, that's a good question.
I think it's Super Soul Sunday still. I think she now has it in podcast form and it's so good. I've listened to it as well. But I do want to talk because of everything that you've done, which is unbelievable. I didn't even know a lot of that stuff, having even done research and stuff. Let's talk about Oprah real quick, because Oprah is she is a planet of her own. Like, so much. So my wife loves Oprah. Calls her Mama Oprah because when my so just like you, when I was a kid, my parents got divorced when I was 5 as well. My wife's parents got divorced when she was, I think, 9 or 8. And there was kind of this gap where her mom was a single mom and she was, busy. She had some projects she was working on. She was working full time, doing, keeping the family up. And my wife would come home from school every single day and watch Oprah. The time was the right time. So she would sit down. And so we always joke about it because, like, my wife's like, everything I learned in life, I learned from Oprah, and to this day, she still reads everything and listens to the podcast and watches the shows and goes, we love Oprah as do so many. You've already mentioned a few quotes from her, but what was that like? I mean, I assume, and I can only assume that she's the same as a boss and as as she is, and she kind of really lives by, practices what she preaches, so to speak. What was that experience like? Just her working directly with her specifically. What is Oprah like, and what was that experience like working directly with her so closely?
Yeah. Just to have been in her orbit, I still am like, how did that happen? Like, how was I, because I was 5 years on the show, and then I think an extra 5 on, on the network, and whatnot. And she's just one of those people that, like, it fascinates me, her brain capacity. She remembers everything. She studies everything. Like, if we were going to have a guest on, she would read the book. And even though we would prep her with questions or what background on the guest, she'd say, well, on page 23, you said blah, 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 blah. She really, like, she is involved in everything. Research. And her schedule. I don't know how she does it. It's just really fascinating. All the things that she's involved in and everything she's done, for the girls in her leadership academy in South Africa, there's just she has touched so many people's lives. And, at the beginning, it wasn't like I'm in contact with her every day. There were so many of us. And when it was your show, then you would be with her, and, the executive producers would prep her and whatnot. And then, we'd prepare everything. And it evolved, I guess my presence in her world evolved, I guess, through the years, on the different shows and whatnot. So when it got to the point where we were, on Oprah's Next Chapter or taping Super Soul Sundays, we were on her property in Santa Barbara doing a lot of those. It's so gorgeous and everything, and so I would always be, it was so funny. I would always be the one where we'd plot different ways that she or the guest would open each episode, and someone had to, kind of direct her or whatnot. So it would be like Keith, the DP, would say to me, okay, Shantel, you're going to go hide behind that big tree over there. So we can't see you on the camera, but you can see her. And, you tell her, like, she'd come down on her golf cart, and I'd like put my hand out, like, stop, I remember this one time she's coming down. And it was so funny. And I'm behind this tree, and I'm like, stop. And she's like, you want me to stop? And I'm like, yeah, stop. I'm like, basically you're going to get out of the golf cart with the guest, and you'll walk over the bridge, and then you'll be in camera view, and they'll see you. And she's like, well, do you know how to drive the golf cart? And I'm like, oh yeah, I know how to drive the golf cart. She's like, this is a new golf cart. It drives a little differently, and I'm like sweating it because, I'm sweating that I have got to, when she walks out of the shot, I've got to get in this golf cart. I can't go backwards because that goes beep, 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 like you don't want that in the tape. And if I go forward and I go a little too fast, I'm going to end up in the pond with her brand new golf cart. I don't know how I changed it off onto that story, but she's funny. I mean, she loves Moscow mules. I don't know. It's interesting. You have to, I would say, after shoots and whatnot, every once in a while, it would be like we would find ourselves in a situation if we would be, on location or in a different city where we would be toasting with a Moscow mule. And I was like, I got to be careful because I'm running on adrenaline and I don't want to get so buzzed that I say something silly, because you just don't want to be silly in front of her,
So is it one of those things? I mean, is everybody conscious? Is there a conscious understanding when you're working on set with Oprah that you're working with Oprah? Do you know what I'm saying? Like, because some people just carry that amount of.
Yeah. I mean, I think though, she's so wonderful. I'll never have another boss like that.
Yeah. I'm
sure not. I mean, yes, of course. And you want everything to be buttoned up and you want everything to be perfect. But she's a human like everybody else. I mean, I remember, when I first, oh my gosh, the first time I met her, actually, I will tell you, I landed at the show and it was in the summer and it's hiatus. Everybody's getting ready to launch shows. So she wasn't back in Chicago yet. So my first experience meeting her was I was going back down the back stairwell to go get a soda or something. And I crossed her coming up the stairs and I got really excited and I just like waved and I was like, oh, hey there, like that,
Yeah.
And she looked at me and she went back and she waved and she goes, hey there. And she kept going. And I walked by and I'm like, oh my God, I can't believe I just like, hey there to her, on the stairs, but she, I don't know. And I think some people were probably intimidated, I don't know if that's the Iowa in me. I don't know what, but I would just say, I think we would all say that she provided us with so many mind-blowing experiences that I just cannot even get over, I think like, a couple of things, like she would always say, you get in life what you have the courage to ask for. So I love that, I love that quote because would she
say, was that something that these are like mottos that she would just say like on set or in like a meeting or something?
Suppose I glommed onto that one from, I don't know what, I think or a show or something. Another one I know, when we go in her office and prep her, she had a sign that said, you are responsible for the energy you bring into this room, which I think is so important.
So great.
Because, because I know, like, I tend to get sometimes really excited and I talk really fast. I think that goes back to the make it happen. Like, I also had a boss one time that I was sitting in their office and they looked out and they said, see her gait's too slow, I'm going to fire her. And I'm like, what's a gait? I'm like, oh, that girl's walking too fast, she's going to get fired. So yeah. I think like people always are like, why are you walking so fast? Why? I'm like, oh, there's always something to do. There's always something next, And so I don't know. So
I think those are the attributes that you have that I was referring to at the beginning, that like work ethic that people see and they notice when you're an intern, when you're at this job, and they say, she gets it done. We need her on the show. And again, that's how you kind of worked your way to eventually working.
I think I'm one of those people, I wake up on the right side of the bed pretty much every day, and I'm pretty easygoing. It takes a lot to make me upset or make me angry. So I think I've been able to, make good connections and keep in touch with people. I always try to keep in touch with people afterwards. But it is interesting. I will have to say, a lot of people think, oh my gosh, she has this amazing life and she's had these amazing experiences. And it is true. But I will tell you, I have had more grief and craziness going on that I think, the exciting things in my life that I make happen are also stem from my stepmom passed away in 2014. Even though she'd been diagnosed with pancreatic cancer in 1999, it was still a shock. And she was one of my best friends. Through a strange series of events, a month to the day later, I almost lost my mother after a surgery accident. That I won't go into that, but it's a crazy thing. So my stepmom passed away on March 28th of 2014. I almost lost my mom on April 28th, 2014. June 28th, my stepmom's sister passed away. She had been okay at my stepmom's funeral. She had a reoccurrence of cancer. September 28th, I was at the funeral of one of my cousins who had gone skydiving. She'd never been skydiving before, and they can't really pinpoint anything. She had no health issues, but she had this adrenaline rush, like she felt like she was dying, or not dying, felt like she was falling for 3 days after the skydiving. And she was a Sunday school teacher, and she told her friends she needed to go lay down, and they found her dead half an hour later. So I had this March 28th, my stepmom dies. April 28th, I almost lose my mom. June 28th, this is all the same year. My step aunt passes away. September 8th, I'm at my cousin's funeral. Then after, basically, I'll tell you this, in the last, like say 16, 18 months at the Oprah show, I lost those people, plus 2 grandmas, an uncle, another cousin, and both my dogs. So when Oprah was moving everything from Chicago to LA, I think this was 2015, I had just decided that I needed to take a beat, and I'd missed out on a lot of stuff in life, weddings, birthdays, funerals, all this stuff, because I had been so caught up in like my deadlines and this, that, and the other. And I decided to just take a year off and travel and, do things that made me happy and whatnot. And so there's that, there's that whole component. And then I'm at the point now where I love work, and I'm like work all the time, but I work on things that really make me happy, or I know I'm helping other people. I work with a lot of nonprofits and a lot of foundations, helping with their galas and whatnot. But I think that, and also yesterday marked 7 months that Iowa was hit with this storm called a derecho, straight line winds. It was like, I think it was spanned over 7 hours across the Midwest, but the Cedar Rapids, Iowa, where I grew up, got hit extremely hard.
So were you living in Iowa at the time?
So basically I had been back in Iowa because I was in the middle of, trying to move to Nashville. And then it was like, there was no place I'd rather be than with my family and friends during this pandemic and whatnot.
I think that was the biggest, like early, the last year, honestly, but it has been that moment. And obviously you've seen it in a very real way, where it went from like taking a break from your career, but having this opportunity to do something that you've been wanting to do for a long time. But I think everybody's perspective, everybody had this huge paradigm shift very early in 2020. And then I think as it went from like, oh, this might be like a couple weeks or something, to like, oh, it's been a month. Oh, geez Louise. Everybody's perspective changed really quickly. And I think we really holistically, the big blessing in a bunch of chaos is the prioritization that everybody's kind of had to go through of like you in this case, like I've got opportunities here, and here, but Iowa is where my parents are. And I've been in the rat race for so long. I'm going to stay here. I think.
Well, and I think, and I think in the middle of this, so August 10th of last year, I'm literally on the phone with another story with Lindsay Hadley of Hadley Impact. I had met her, and she's got this amazing social, impact company that their clients are everybody from the United Nations to the Mental Health Coalition to Kenneth Cole to Orphan Myth. I know we'll talk about this down the road, but I was on the phone with her, and my mom kept calling, and I'm like, she's called 3 times. Like, my mom does not I need to figure out what's going on. So literally, like in Iowa, tornadoes might come up every once in a while, but my mom said, are you watching the news? You need to take cover right now. And I look outside, I'm like, there's nothing going on. I'm like, okay. She's like, you need to take cover. I pull my car in the garage. My aunt calls me. She's like, you need to take cover. This massive storm is coming. I'm like, okay. So I grab my soda and some pizza out of the refrigerator. I go down, and I was at my dad's place, and I go downstairs. I turn on the TV, and I hear the newscaster say, if you're listening to this right now, we are going to lose power, and we're going to lose power for a long time, and take cover. And the next thing I know, it's like, boom, like massive, all the power goes out. Winds so loud, words cannot even describe this. I have my camera out for everything. Everything. I was so terrified. I went into this Jack and Jill bathroom and sat there for 45 minutes, paralyzed by the sound of what was going on outside. It literally, basically what happened, this derecho storm that nobody had heard of.
I've never even heard of a derecho storm, but derecho
I know.
Straight,
well,
so you're saying it was straight winds.
Straight line, exactly. So a tornado is circular or a hurricane. So basically Supposedly like $7.5 billion of damage was done and through Iowa. The Des Moines Register said it was the most costly thunderstorm in U.S. history. So it raged, by the time the storm raced through Cedar Rapids, or like where I'm from, the winds were 140 miles an hour.
Goodness gracious. So
in Cedar Rapids, they approximated 750,000 trees were downed or damaged. 750,000. The Forest Preserve, I think, over the state of Iowa said, I think there's like 724,000 acres of forest that were damaged. Yeah. 14 million, acres of crops. I mean, so I'm in this bathroom hearing this, and I'm texting my cousin. My cousin had called me from Des Moines, and he's like, it ripped through here. All the trees are down in our house. I'm like, oh my God. So I'm texting people in different parts of Iowa. Can you tell me what's going on? Like, when is it going to end? I mean, it literally, I haven't actually listened to them. I'm just remembering this. I actually made recordings on my phone, like in the dark, like saying my goodbyes. And I'm not trying to be dramatic, but this thing was so loud. It was unbelievable. It was just terrifying. And I had no idea where anybody in my family was, So of course it finally ends, and I look out and I'm like, oh, of course my dad's neighborhood gets hit. And I'm like, he lives on a golf course, and the tree line, like literally if I walked out the back door over to this area of trees across the golf course, there's probably 50 of them that were up. There's maybe 8 still standing to the top. The rest are still out there in a pile on the ground. I walk out the front door, and he lives in a neighborhood where the average age is probably 70. And it's just like all these people climbing over trees. And I'm like, oh my gosh, of course our neighborhood gets hit. Well, it was the entire city. I mean, I have countless numbers of friends who had hundreds of trees down on their own property. And it was literally like driving around, like a scene of a movie. It still is yesterday. I mean, I don't know, I'm tangenting, but we had no power. My brother and my aunt and uncle were without power for over 3 weeks, had to move out of their houses, trees on their houses. And it's like these trees came down on houses, cars, buildings, livestock. So
I'm not like a huge news buff or anything, but I keep my eye on things. I never heard about this. Well,
so here, I'll tell you, the pandemic and us not having electricity played a big role in this. Because I have to tell you, I was like, oh my God, I'm, being a producer, I know when a story is big. And I was like, oh, so I was putting out messages on Facebook, like, news friends, please come here, and the part of the problem when this derecho storm, that first of all, it came with virtually no warning. Yeah. There was maybe 15 minutes, no warning. So people were caught off guard. The fact that I think there were 4 deaths in the state of Iowa is a miracle and a godsend and everything. I had friends that were trapped in their cars, like trees came down on their cars, friends trapped in their storm cellars. I mean, it's like a scene out of a movie. You cannot even describe it. But part of the problem was most of the people who had stories to tell had no electricity. They couldn't tell them. So thank God I have, some wonderful friends in the media. And my friend Chris Gillen is a supervising producer for CBS this morning. And she messaged me. She's like, we want to do a story on the farmers, but because of COVID, we can send a reporter from Chicago. They can only drive 3.5 hours into Iowa to drive 3.5 back to have like 3 hours on the ground. So luckily, I'm like, okay, 3.5 hours, that's Davenport. So another friend of mine, Colleen Dunnigan, who's also still with Oprah, she was from Davenport, Iowa. I'm like, Colleen, we need to find a farmer in Davenport. So CBS will do a story on the derecho. And so this awesome reporter, Adriana Diaz, came in, got a drone, flew it over the crops. My friend Susan Kroll is a producer who flies all over the country for NBC. She tweeted out to NBC, we need to help Iowa. The Today Show did a piece, the Tonight Lightning News did. They sent Gabe Gutierrez to do a story. The Weather Channel was actually here. They owned the story. I have to say, Justin Michaels owned the story. They were here for a week, but still barely saw anything. I mean, we were still in crisis mode. When I tell you this city, I drove around yesterday at the 7-month anniversary, and it's all I could do not to cry, not to hyperventilate when you see these trees still on people's homes, like the damage. There's just like, you drive down the highway and it's just like, there's 200 trees down, people's roofs are still off. And I think because of COVID and because there's so much going on in 2020, I mean, think of the state of the world and everything else that was going on. But I'll have to say, like, you know, if anybody is interested in Iowa, you know, it's like, we need plumbers, we need roofers, there is so much work to be done in Iowa. There is so much firewood everywhere. Nat Geo finally just did an article on us about a month ago.
We'll post that in the Reddit.
Yeah, I would love to, like, you know, because there's like a Facebook page that's like derecho storm research page, because it's just like the National Guard were here, and linemen. There were in Cedar Rapids alone, where I grew up. So we lost 65% of our tree canopy. Over 3,000 power lines were down or destroyed. The linemen in the National Guard said they've never seen anything like it. And clearly I have a little PTSD from this. I mean, and it's another thing, like when we talk about like all of this and, you know, I want to get out and about and travel again, but like, I like to be home. I'm like, oh my, even though I was in the, you know, my dad's like downstairs freaking out, so scared. I now have a little bit of issue, like going out. Like I have to own that. Like between losing all the people in my life and living through this storm and the terror of all that, it's hard. I mean, it's been, you know, so I think people, and I'm saying that because I think it is not lost on me that I have had so many incredible pinch me, oh my God, I can't believe I did that. I can't believe I was there moments in my career. But I've also, I've had a lot of tragedy and a lot of, like, I have to get up, like, honestly, I have to tell you this, like, music is a big part of what gets me through. Mm-hmm. And so I don't know if you saw The Greatest Showman. There is amazing Kiala Settle, who
I was actually going to ask you about Kiala Settle because I have a
I love okay. Yeah, we have to talk. We have to tangent for her a second. So she's saying, "This Is Me." She played the bearded woman in the movie. And that This Is Me was Oscar nominated, won a Golden Globe. She has another song out called Harder. And it's like, you know, you fall down and you got to get up and try harder. Yeah. I'm not going to sing for you because I'm not a great singer. But I have to tell you, out of all the artists I've seen in my entire life, anywhere, nobody moves me like Kiala Settle. Like, she is just such a bright light and an amazing spirit. And, you know, I have been blessed to have, you know, been in her presence several times. Because another tangent, through my Oprah show work, probably in 2010, my boss said to me one day, "Hey, do you have a passport?" I'm like, "Yeah." And she's like, "Okay, so you're going to fly to Australia in 2 days and film with Hugh Jackman for his movie Australia." And I'm like, "What? Oh, I love Australia. You know, I've never been there, but I love it. And I know I want to go." So here I am, you know, getting on a plane. I had to, and typically when you film with a celebrity, they'd give you, you know, you'd get an hour or something. Well, his publicist said, "You have all day." So I get to Australia, I scout, I go rent this like big, nice boat so we can do a cruise down the harbor. We went up in a seaplane, we did all this stuff. And I mean, it was amazing. And he is an amazing human being. But at some point he said, "We've got to get Oprah to Australia." And so I went back from this trip. We flew back to Chicago on the same flight for him to be on the Oprah show with Nicole Kidman for Baz Luhrmann's movie Australia. Oh, and that's another thing. I had to hand carry a not yet finished version of the movie on the plane so the audience could see this. And I'm like, oh my God, like if it gets out, Baz is going to be really upset, you know, if it gets erased in security, you know. So, I mean, there's these moments, like whenever you were on an Oprah shoot, you'd have all these tapes with you and it'd be like, I'd guard them like with my life. Yeah, like, even though I knew they were in my bag and it was all locked up, I'd look at my bag like, oh my gosh, if I lose these tapes with all this stuff, it's not going to be good. But so I get back to you had said, "We need Oprah to come to Australia." And I'm like, okay. So we go back. She does the show with Nicole Kidman and Hugh Jackman. And I pitched this.
It's a great movie, by the way. I love it.
Oh, it's such a great movie. And I fell in love with Australia. It's my favorite place on the planet. But I made this like 20-page pitch of all the reasons Oprah should go to Australia. And at the time, my bosses were like, yeah, you know, keep dreaming. That's not going to happen. So every time I had a chance, I'd repitch something different about going to Australia. Probably like 2 years later, we're on our summer break and my boss, Katie Davis, called and she said, "Can you pare that long pitch down into one page so we can pitch it to Oprah for season 25? And this is another thing I still can't believe. Now, it took the entire village of the Oprah show to make this all happen. But the season 25 premiere of the Oprah show, the last season, she surprised the audience by saying, "We're going to Australia."
I remember that
John Travolta rolled out in like a mock Qantas plane.
I remember that.
We went over to Australia for 3 weeks, took 365 people over to Australia. I still cannot believe that happened. But in the process of this, I kept getting assigned to Hugh when he was on the Oprah show or whatnot. And then I met his wonderful wife, Deborah Lee Furness, and she founded an amazing organization called Hopeland. So anyway, probably about 3 years ago, Deborah Lee and her team asked me if I would help produce her foundation's charity galas in New York City. And so
that's Hugh Jackman's wife?
Yes, okay. Yes. And so the very first year that I did that, Kiala was one of the musical artists and she's saying, "This is me." And I also got to book an amazing friend of mine that you also have to have on. Her name is Ariana Afsar. And she originated the role of Eliza Hamilton in Chicago's Hamilton. And I knew she was amazing. And so I booked her to sing.
Ariana what?
Afsar, Afsar. She's amazing. You have to have her on. She has a new play called Jeanette Musical. It's about the first U.S. Congresswoman ever in the United States from the state of Montana. Nobody knew about her. Ari has composed a whole musical that would have been making its way to Broadway if it weren't for COVID.
I'm sending you an email as soon as we're done talking with the list of all these.
Absolutely incredible. And she's like a little sister to me. And then, it's so funny. When my Oprah show time is ending and I'm leaving Chicago to go to Australia for a couple months, and my friend Chuck LaBella, who's another amazing person, who is a celebrity booker for everything, he emails me and he's like, "Hey, my friend Ari's moving to Chicago. You should really meet her." And I'm like, "Oh, okay." He said, "She's moving to Chicago. She's going to be part of Hamilton. You should meet her." And so I email her and I said, "Oh, I'm actually leaving Chicago, but, here's my dentist, here's my doctor, here's this. If you need anything, would love to meet you sometime." And we exchange a few emails and go on our merry way. So like 6 months later, I'm in Chicago for my friend Jody's 50th birthday. And Ari and I were going to go to lunch finally and meet each other for the first time. So I messaged my friend Jody and I said, "Hey, I'm coming into town. I want to stay with you." And she goes, "Okay, well, Friday night, we're actually going to Hamilton. We got tickets to Hamilton." I'm like, "Oh, on Tuesday, I'm going to lunch with this girl named Ari Afsar.
Eliza.
Look her up and see if she's, you see her in the playbill or whatever." So she calls me like 2 hours later. She's like, "She's Eliza Hamilton." I'm like, yeah. "Oh, I had no idea. So I'm like, "Oh." So this is another tangent that I can't believe I'm telling you this story. So we go to lunch and I'm always on my computer. That's another problem. On my computer, you can tell I'm like high on adrenaline. I always kind of have something out of whack in my back or something. And I'd been going to a chiropractor and I had 2 back-to-back really big adjustments, something like a napropath, basically more than a massage. And it had been my friend's 50th birthday a couple nights before. So I maybe had indulged a little bit too much prior to this lunch with Ari. So we go to this lunch and we're sitting there and we're at this French restaurant a couple of blocks down from the theater where Hamilton is. And we're talking and I'm just like, "Oh my gosh, I love this girl. She's so sweet." And, and she says, "Do you want to come see the theater?" I'm like, "Oh yeah, sure. I want to see the theater." But I'm like feeling not good,
Yeah.
I cannot believe I'm going to tell you the story. It's so funny. So we go in, we take a couple of pictures on the set and everything. And during lunch, she said to me, "It's really hard because I can't get sick. Because if I get sick, then I can't be in the play and all this stuff." And so part of me, I'm like, am I getting the flu or am I just, this adjustment or what is going on? So I literally leave the theater. I can't believe I'm going to tell you this. I go out, I have this coat that had this huge hood, but I'm like, I'm going to be sick. And I literally got sick in the planter outside of the theater. And then I felt 100% better. And I told her that story like 2 years later and we laugh about it so hard, but
you're thinking now I'm going to go to Hamilton in 2 nights and she's not going to be in the play because I just got her sick.
No, she's one of my dearest friends and we talk all the time and I'm so proud of her and everything she's done. But anyway, she sang at the first Hopeland Gala that I helped Deb Furness, married to Hugh Jackman, produced, and Kiala was there. So Kiala is unbelievable, but she has a song called Harder that came out about a year ago. And I highly recommend anybody listen to it who is feeling down or out. It's a really great song. She is an amazing human.
So we actually lived in Laie, Hawaii for a number of years, where she's from. So she like went to Kahuku High School right there where we live. So we just moved back to Arizona in April from there. So anyway, I actually saw the movie. I saw The Greatest Showman in Hawaii, like right up the street from where she's from. But anyway, it was a big deal. It was a big deal there as well because she's a hometown hero at this point, right? I mean,
I love it. I love it. And she's so fun and she's such a hoot. And she's got a show April 16th coming out with John Stamos on Disney Plus called Big Shots.
I saw that. I saw you tweeted that. That's awesome.
Yeah, right.
Is it a musical?
That's awesome. I don't know much more than that. I just know that
she was on Broadway in Waitress or something before that.
She's done a ton of stuff. I mean, you know what I will tell you too? You have to Google her audition for The Greatest Showman. I think it has like 62 million views.
Oh, it's her actual audition.
Her actual audition, they recorded it. She was not sure she wanted to audition or whatnot. And honestly, it is the most, I mean, you have to watch it and then you tell me, but it is unbelievable. Like her experience and how she just comes to life. And literally, I think, I could be wrong, but I think that her audition is what actually moved the film into being made because she slayed it. Like she slayed that song. And it was just like, oh my God. Like,
yeah. And I think Hugh Jackman had been trying to get that movie. He had been trying to get the movie made for quite a while. And it just,
he and his wife are two of the most amazing.
He's another one of those guys that just seems so genuine and authentic, even though he's insanely famous.
He is. I mean, and he's starting, if you like coffee, he has started his Laughing Man Coffee, where he and his dad went to Ethiopia several years ago and met a farmer named Dikali. And, you know, they of course Dikali didn't know who Hugh was. And he started this whole Laughing Man Coffee, and 100% of the proceeds go back to Ethiopia. Oh, it's like, you know, it's a really cool, there's a whole documentary on that as well. You know,
it's gotta be refreshing to be Hugh Jackman and go somewhere where people don't know who you are.
Yeah.
When you're going everywhere you ever go, it's instantly recognized.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know. I can't say enough about he and Deb. They're two really, really, really amazing humans and do so much and give so much, you know, and are always thinking like he loves homemade bread. I've been watching on Instagram. He's making homemade bread every day and taking it to healthcare workers and dropping it off. You know, I mean, it's just like,
come on, Hugh, you're making us all
the craziest thing. But I would just say, like, also in this time, you know, of like not giving up on dreams and everything, you know, I through Nashville have met so many amazing artists. And, you know, one of them is a gal named Mickey Guyton, and she is up for a Grammy. She's going to be hosting the ACM Awards with Keith Urban. It was announced this morning, but country music and country radio, I think it's like only 8% of songs on the radio are sung by women. CMT last year is run by an amazing woman named Leslie Fram, and they initiated this equal play where they play 50% women, 50% males. But Mickey is this beautiful, wonderful human that I met probably 3 years ago. And not only is she a woman, but she's an African-American woman in country music and, you know, was having a hard time getting played. And I know she has said this and wouldn't mind me saying this, but even up to about a year ago was questioning whether or not she should be in country music. And the trajectory of her singing songs that are socially relevant to the times that this have been going on this year. She is now like, I mean, she's up for a freaking Grammy, and she's going to be hosting the ACM Awards with Keith Urban. And at the ACM Awards last fall, she sang her song, and Keith Urban played the piano for her, you know, and I think I saw that actually. Yeah. Her music is just unbelievable, but it's just another one of those things like, you know, if you have a dream, keep chasing it. Don't give up, you know, like you know, there's so many people out there that, you know, and it goes back to that, you know, that Oprah quote that I said, it doesn't matter who you are or where you're from, you know, you have the ability to triumph comes in you, you know? So I think it's hard. I mean, I'm tangenting again. I struggle every day with like, what am I going to be when I grow up? What am I going to do? Like, am I supposed to be here in Iowa? Like, like I have all this footage on my camera that I'm like, I need to make a documentary of all the stuff that people have gone through. Oh, and I have one other thing I would love to tell you. I have a boyfriend and his name is Knight. He's a llama.
Shout out to Knight the llama.
I
really didn't know where that was going. I'm like, oh, that's a cool name, Knight.
I know. I could be really quick about this, but I love animals. And one of my best friends from childhood, her name's Susie Van Meter, and she has llamas and alpacas. And we had been 2 days before the derecho hit Iowa, we had been working on a video of Llama Llama Loves to Read, a book reading for the Cedar Rapids Library for their Dolly Parton Imagination Library program. And
is that associated with the Llama Llama books, like the kids' books?
So it was a Llama Llama book, but the Cedar Rapids Library got permission for us to read the book and do a little video of it with the llamas. So we were super excited about it. It was going to help raise funds for the reading program for the kids in Iowa. We deliver the piece to them. It was, for Facebook, for their socials, like 2 days before the storm hit. So kind of derailed that, whatnot. But also then the Marion Library, I grew up I went to high school in the city of Marion. One of my classmates, Nick, is the mayor of Marion now. And 95% of homes and businesses were damaged in this derecho. Like it's like when I tell you, like yesterday driving around, I mean, it's just like roofs are still off. It is still disaster zone here. You cannot even believe what it is like 7 months out. But the Marion Public Library was destroyed. They could not even reopen. So we did at the holiday time a book reading of Llama Llama Holiday Drama that they put on their website. But our whole intention was, I'm stuck in Iowa because of COVID. I'm not stuck. I'm happy to be here, and I'm happy to not be living in a high rise in a big city. I love being in Iowa with my family. But my friend Susie and I were like, oh, we're going to do this educational stuff with llamas on the internet. And it's just going to be really fun because they've got nieces and nephews and all that. And we have this Instagram page called Knight Llama. So my boyfriend's name is Knight, like a knight in shining armor, KINGHT. And then like Knight, like you go to bed, llama. And we still haven't gotten that back up because there's been so much cleanup. The miracle that the llamas and the alpacas lived.
Yeah,
Susie had they had over 100 trees down on their property, all their fencing down. And the fact that she had the barn doors open, it's a small barn. The fact that the wind went through and didn't take that barn and that livestock is still alive is just a miracle.
Yeah. I
mean, it's unbelievable. And that happened, 2 days before they were supposed to get both of their girls to college in North Carolina. So they had to, when I say we were without power here, we were without power, we were without electricity for weeks. They had to get gas out of their lawnmowers and all their different, equipment on their property to put in their car to get to, somewhere to get out of town, basically. Yeah. And leave these llamas oh my gosh, hopefully they're going to be okay. And when you live, they live just on the outskirts of town. So when you have no power, you have no water, which means they had to haul water through the creek to the livestock. A lot of people did. There are probably, 10,000 stories of people that one story is worse than, you just cannot believe what, I don't know.
So is there something that people can do to help with this right now? Is there like a donation? Is it through the Red Cross or something? Is there?
Well, you know what? So basically there's a couple of things, and I would love to look at this. I know that there's something called the Iowa Giving Crew. It's a 501(c) not-for-profit partnered with the Iowa Derecho Storm Research page. Okay. Because I know people you cannot get a roofer, you cannot get a plumber, you cannot get everybody has a problem. When I say every street got hit, you cannot drive down the street yesterday. There's 20-foot stumps in front of people's yards. It costs $3,000 to have a tree removed on the most part. If a tree hits your house, insurance will pay for it. If it lands in your yard, they don't pay for it. So somebody that has 10, 20 trees down in their yard cannot afford to move that tree. They're just there. And the way the storm took them it's so interesting, the ways they're cracked off or half of a tree or part of a tree or whatnot. But the other thing is I think, sending good vibes, to Iowa. I mean, Iowa is like really strong and everything, but it's like there's just a lot of cleanup left to do.
Sounds like a good opportunity if you're in Iowa or close to Iowa to go do some service, or if you're a plumber or a roofer or a technician to say, hey, here's a business opportunity. There's a lot of work in Iowa right now.
Yes,
let's go out there and figure out how we can help or serve.
Yes, and I know they have to be, licensed or whatnot, which is some of the problem. But it's just like there is no shortage of work to do, and there have been so many good Samaritans and everything. And now that it's spring, people are starting to get back out. But again, like I was out on the roads yesterday, it's just this truck after truck after truck of these, these trucks from Flannery. I can't remember if they're from Wisconsin or Minnesota. I should know that by now, but they have been here for months hauling this tree debris. I mean, it is just unbelievable.
Well, if you listen to the podcast and you're somewhere close to Iowa, you've got weekend plans.
And what I will tell you, and then I'll button it up about this. What was hard for me is like, I'm a producer. This is my thing, but it's like, it was hard with being electricity being out, with, COVID. Everything else happened in the world. It's hard, to ask for help when, people are hurting all around the world. Mm-hmm. So, but it's also just so interesting to me that this story is so big, one of the biggest storms ever. And most people have still never heard about it.
Well, you're talk about like the timing, like you said, with COVID. And then that was like just before the presidential election, a few months, like there's so much going on that was, I can't imagine all the things that the news just had to say, well, it's prioritization at this point, and that's a big deal, but we've got this,
and I have to give, I have to give props to the local news stations, KGAN and KCRG and everything. I mean, they have been working nonstop to cover this story, but it's just literally like, everybody, has, like I was talking to a friend the other day. She's like, oh, our neighbor is 83. She has 80 trees down. The insurance won't even come look at her house because they can't even get up to the front door. I mean, we're talking 7 months later, and this is still somebody's grandma living in a situation like this. It's just,
I don't know. Brutal.
Okay, but I feel blessed. Yeah.
Yeah. Hopefully it'll
Thank you.
Around.
Thank you
like
for giving me that time.
Yeah. And like you said, spring is here. So hopefully the cold won't, will go away sooner than later, and people will at least be able to get out and do it without, it being, I guess it gets pretty cold in Iowa, right? I've never been to Iowa, but I assume
it's been freezing. And, to tell you the truth, it's been such a rush. There's been so many accidents, people going out and buying their own chainsaws and then cutting their arm off, cutting their leg off. I mean, it was, I really need to make a documentary out of all the footage that I have. I mean, I have so much footage on my phone that would just blow your mind. And there's so much else, out there. But I don't know, music gets me through, and being hopeful for your whole thing is about being hopeful. We have to be hopeful for today and tomorrow. And
this is a great story. Before we get into the orphan myth. But yours is a really great, your life is a really great example of when you look at somebody, and you've said this multiple times, but from the outside looking in, it's really easy to look and say, they've got it all. Like, they figured it out. They've had, all of the, things have fallen their way, and they've had it really easy, whatever it might be. It's really easy to look at that and say, but the hopeful, or I guess the reality here, and where you can find hope, is that even somebody like you who's built, one, you've worked insanely hard. It's not like anything was given to you, right? You've worked hard. We talked all about that, but then you've had these incredible opportunities, and it would be easy to look and judge in that way. But there's also a lot going on behind the scenes. And I think, whether it's the people that you've lost, or a storm that you just could never have expected that causes a form, you think of PTSD, you immediately think of like veterans or something, but really people have things that they face every single day that cause them to have some form of post-traumatic stress, and it can be real. So I think, listening to you, and I really appreciate you sharing the things that you are struggling with, in addition to, hey, look at the cool stuff that I've done, because it gives people a great lens to look at others through, which is, I'm not going to judge, and I'm going to be kind, and I'm going to be thoughtful and considerate, and, look for ways to build people up and uplift, and not allow judgment or negativity or an assumption about somebody, get in the way. I think, again, that's such a good reminder, because it would be easy to say, look at the resume, look at the LinkedIn, look at the, all of the credits, and see things differently. So, the fact that you're able to find hope in this. And I love that I'm a huge music fan. I feel like we have a lot in common, and I love country music. I love all music.
Yeah.
But I'm a huge music fan, and I love that that's something that can help you get through it. And then being close to your parents and like the decision to do that and to be close to them. And
right.
I love it.
100%. And I have another like little Iowa story. If you love country music and, tie it back to Iowa, I'm really blessed that one of my best friends from college has a daughter. Her name's Olivia Ohms. And about, I don't know, maybe 3 years ago, my friend Jane called me and she said, oh, Olivia, is doing some really great things in country music, and she'd love to do some things in Nashville. And I was like, okay, I had just been in Nashville. And my friend Scott Atkins is a publicist for Tanya Tucker, Naomi Judd, a whole bunch of people like that. And we were talking about that, he didn't have anyone young on his roster at that point. And I was like, I don't know anybody young. And my friend Jane calls me literally like 2 weeks later. And she's like, can I send you Olivia's new music video? Now she's an independent artist, 15 at this time. And she had already been part of Radio Disney's. She was actually, they call it RDU, Radio Disney RDU. She was the first female artist on that platform. But my friend sends me this music video, their homemade independent music video. And I'm like, this is really good. And she's 15 years old. So I sent her video to my friend Scott. And within the next week, he goes to CMT and takes her video. And they start playing it and put it on their CMT platform. And she is unbelievable. She's was made part of the CMT Artist Discovery Program. She's sang at the Ryman. She's sang tons of places in Nashville now. But I'm so inspired by her because she's also a 2020 grad. She lives in Huntington Beach, California. And, she's got these wonderful Iowa roots because her, mom was from Iowa. But she was supposed to go to college at Belmont University, the Curb School of Music Business. It was very prestigious. And COVID came along. And, it was the decision, do we go to school in Nashville or do we go in California? And she's now studying psychology at Cal Poly. But she has her new music video called Hideaway is coming out. It's going to be launched in a couple of weeks. The song is already out. The Hideaway, it's perfect. It's a song, she's 18 years old. It's like a country jazz song, but talks all about understanding that there are things in life that we can't control, and even at 18 years old, she knows that, the song's about coming to terms with life's trial and errors, accepting the often repetitious process in order to, progress and grow. And, it's just amazing that, so many people are able to channel their emotions through song and help people and lift them up. So I think if anybody is a music lover out there, find out who you love and play their music all day long, like put them on your iPod or whatever, because I feel like that has been one of the biggest blessings in my life to, put music on and try to shut out whatever else is going on in my brain at the time that's keeping me up at night.
If you're in that moment of like stress or whatever, what's your go-to? Who's your first person you think of to go to Spotify? And I'm going to go back to Nashville again. There's an amazing artist named Tennille Towns. She is the 2020 Academy of Country Music's new female vocalist. And I heard her music probably a couple years ago and have just loved it. And she has so many songs. One of them is called Somebody's Daughter. That's the first one that caught me. And it's basically, it caught me because it's a song about her singing about a girl standing on the street with a cardboard box, a homeless girl, and that she's somebody's daughter. And why am I in my car and she's on the street? And why am I who I am? And, who is she and how is she lost and who forgot her? And I remember when I lived in LA, I remember seeing the girls out on the street that, were either homeless or, had turned to prostitution or whatnot. And it always haunted me. So when I heard this song a couple of years ago, I'm like, oh my gosh, that song resonates with me. So I just started listening to her music. And she has a lot of really wonderful songs. And she's also a wonderful human being. She's from Canada. And at age 15, she started this organization called Big Hearts for Big Kids, where they help homeless youth and whatnot. And I'm spiraling this back. I've adored her from afar, met her a couple times. And through a series of events, this is another random series of events, but one of my best friends from college
is on the board for an organization called Halo, and it's helping art liberate orphans. And the founder of Halo is this wonderful woman named Rebecca, who happens to know Oprah because Rebecca and Oprah both won this Power of Women Award in 2015. So I got asked to help with this virtual event a couple of weeks ago for Halo. Oprah just happened to be the special guest. So I got to help them produce that. And then when it came to music, it's all about helping homeless kids. I'm like, you have got to book Tennille Town. So we were able to book Tennille, and she opened and closed this virtual event. So I just, sometimes I'm like, I pinch myself because it's like, how did this just happen? But I love to connect the dots and be the connector and for good causes. So
I love the quote you shared. And I think, was it Oprah that you said, with the walk with purpose, you find destiny, and find destiny, you find peace?
That is Dr. Bertice Berry.
So I love that. And it seems like as you tell a lot of these stories, talk about walking with purpose, you find destiny, and then you find destiny, and now you're finding peace. One of the things I say, and it's basically my way dumbed down, not a smart version of what she said here, but I used to teach at a university as an entrepreneur in residence, and I taught students. And one of the things that I've said 1,000 times on the podcast, so anybody that listens knows, but one of the things that I'd always say is that when you work hard, then opportunities present themselves. And when opportunities present themselves and you take advantage of those opportunities, so you capitalize on the opportunities, then more opportunities come. And you're a great example of that, right? You look at people's backgrounds, line upon line, lesson upon lesson, and you've had a lot of these stories where you said it was serendipitous, or, and then this happened. And the fact of the matter is, though, it was like you were walking again with purpose, and you knew kind of the direction you wanted to go. And then you saw an opportunity, and rather than shying away from that opportunity or saying, I'm going through a divorce, it would be a huge pain to move across the country right now, I'm trying to figure this out, saying, no, I'm going to take advantage of this opportunity. And then what happens? 50 other opportunities come. And then what I've seen as I've talked to more and more successful people, and as I've seen a mild, moderate level of success, is that as you follow that process, then you get to a place where you're able to pick and choose a little bit more you just get more opportunities. And so then you can it gets a little more narrow. Your focus can get a little bit more narrow to say, like you're doing now, look, I want to be a consultant, and I want to focus on projects that I love and that I'm passionate about, that I can give it the grind that I've been giving all these other things, which have been amazing, but I'm going to focus all of that energy into projects that I not only feel, fulfillment on X, Y, and Z professionally, but also emotionally or spiritually or whatever that is, to really feel this type of connection. So again, I love that quote, and it's one I'm going to remember.
You should follow her on Instagram every day. Sure. She does like 2 or 3 little minute.
I can't even read my handwriting. It's Bertice.
Dr. It's just Dr. and then Bertice, Bertice Berry, Dr. Bertice Berry. And every day on Instagram, she gives like a 2 or 3 minute little story that's always got a lesson, and she's real calming, and you laugh, and she's funny. I mean, she's a comedian, she's a sociologist. She's a motivational speaker like top. I mean, she talks to all the big countries around, all the big companies around the world and everything, but she's like the most down to earth. I love her. But yes, when you walk with purpose, you collide with destiny. And when you find destiny, you find peace. So I think about that.
Clyde, that's even better. I said find. Clyde.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah. It's all good. It's all good.
Okay. So talk about walking with purpose and finding destiny. So now we're going to talk about Orphan Myth.
Yes.
So we referenced Lindsay Hadley, who you talked about a little bit ago.
Yes.
And you've built this relationship with her, and she is doing so many incredible things. Like I said, you should go back and listen to her episode. It just went live yesterday, but it's so good. I loved talking to her and hearing her backstory. But the Orphan Myth is a project that you've been involved with in some capacity. Just talk to me a little bit about what capacity that has been in, and then just kind of your experience with this whole campaign and what, the potential you've seen. You've worked with a lot of cool organizations over the years, it sounds like, but what are some of the things that you've seen and learned through the process of getting familiar with the Orphan Myth, and what some of the potentials are that you see of people as they get involved and contribute and help out?
Yeah, it's really interesting. And, I met Lindsay a couple of years ago, and we've been trying to, what's interesting, and not to go back to the storm, we've been trying to work together for a couple of years, and we were on the phone with me supposed to start on Orphan Myth the day the derecho was happening. And so I got delayed for about a month because I was so caught up into that swirl. And I really wanted to work with her because she is an amazing human. Just for a second, so I think what I told you that her, if you look at Hadley Impact, their clients are everyone from the United Nations Foundation to the Mental Health Coalition, from Kenneth Cole. Lindsay was one of the first executive producers of Global Citizen Fest. That is an amazing thing as well to get. Oh my gosh. Like if people need to be a global citizen, it's a free thing to do. You get it's the most amazing thing ever. But so we had been wanting to work together. I met her because she also helped launch Deb Furness's Hopeland. So we had met at the Hopeland galas, wanted to work together for a couple of years. So finally she said, okay, I have this project called Orphan Myth. And, when she said it's all about helping, kids find homes and whatnot, I'm like, I'm in, because again, like you said, I always want to do things that help out other people. So people can find out a lot of information about it at orphanmyth.org. But basically, they believe that every child has the right to belong in a family. And first of all, they're dispelling, myths. Like a lot of people have misconceptions of what an orphan is. Is that, people think that kids in orphanages have no family or no parents. They think there are no orphans in the United States, and that, the problem with kids in foster care is not solvable. So first of all, this organization is trying to dispel those myths, So basically it is a group. Well, let me say, so I'll tell you, like, one of the truths is, if it's okay, I might just read this one if it's all right.
Yeah, please do.
Children are often living in institution as a result of poverty, and as many as 80% have a living parent or relative in the community who could care for them if they had the right support. It says, there's over 420,000 children in the United States foster care system. The majority of them need a loving foster family while they wait to return to their biological families. 100,000 will never be able to return home and are waiting to be adopted. So that's 100,000 kids in the United States. So this whole orphan myth has several different arms of having different projects in place to try to help, orphan or children who are, living without their parents have a family. And so basically they also say that, if one family in every 3 church congregations in America adopted a child, that would be enough families that the 100 and, plus thousands of children who are orphans or in foster care would go away. They'd have a forever home. This is a huge campaign that's rolling out with 25 plus NGOs, a lot of big faith leaders. From March 22nd, it's starting. And there's this is what's complicated. I mean, people kind of need to get on the website, but it's basically, there's a campaign called 100% Participation Campaign. And it believes that it's going to take 100% of us to get children into a safe, loving family. And so this whole group of professionals, NGOs, faith leaders, influencers, and businesses are coming together with a really cool campaign that's going to be launched on social media, and a lot of big influencers who I can't name yet because they haven't been announced are going to be getting involved, but mainly just to, raise the awareness that there are children in America that can be adopted and can be adopted like right now. There's also another, organization that is, there's so many people involved in this, but there's a really cool organization, and it's on Instagram as well, called America's Kids Belong. And they have something called the I Belong Project. And they make videos of children who are up for adoption right now that people can go on and look at their stories and see their stories. And,
and we actually interviewed, and it'll probably be before this episode. I'm not sure the exact schedule yet, but Brian Mavis, who's the founder of America's Kids Belong. I hope I said his name right. I'm pretty sure. I don't have it in front of me.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, so we interviewed him as well, and he talks all about this, and hopefully, people can go check that out as well. And that 100% participation campaign, I love it because there so many times, and we've talked to a lot of people about this now that you will have heard this week as we talk about the orphan myth, but oftentimes you hear about these problems and it's like, clearly that's a problem. I'm not going to go adopt a kid right now. And what can I do? But this 100% participation campaign is it's more a collaborative team effort in a way to say, whether it's your church group or just your family or your sports team or whatever, to go, and you can go on the website, orphanmyth.org, which we've talked about, and you can register, but you can get your group together and say, look, everybody participate. Even if you give $1 or we give $100, you give, $10,000, whatever, it doesn't matter. But if everybody can contribute, then this is both in the United States that they're working towards, but then also in the bigger picture globally, because in the United States, again, one of these myths is that there's no orphans. There are orphans. They're called foster kids in the U.S. And but globally,
look at you. I think you need to sign up.
Well, I've interviewed a number of people, and I talked with Lindsay quite a bit. I will sign up. MWI is going to be involved.
Yes.
So, but it's a big problem, and this gives you the opportunity to be a part of the solution to something that you may think there's no way I would ever be a part of that solution. Because again, you jump to the extreme of, I'm not going to have foster kids and I'm not going to adopt, even though many of you should, but I'm just saying that's a big commitment. So I love it. Yeah. And I can't wait, what we're doing with the podcast is helping spread the message and interviewing amazing people like you that are involved with it so that we can share that message. And then, I can't wait to see, I don't even know who some of the people that are going to be, blasting.
Well, and that's the thing. And I'm so grateful for you for saying that so eloquently about what it is about, because there is so many moving pieces to this. Mm-hmm. Lindsay and her team have been working on this for over a year, a long time, maybe even longer. And I, have been brought in to be a connector to influencers and help with the media and help with the social stuff and all that. So when it comes down to the nitty gritty of the campaign and everything that it does, my brain hasn't been able to absorb all of that information because I'm working on it peripherally in tandem with several other events on my plate. So thank you for explaining the 100% participation Lindsay better than I did on my tired bride brain, but I would also say
how lucky she is to have you involved. I can't imagine.
Oh no, I feel really blessed to have met her and, to be a part of it. I mean, honestly, they have so many amazing campaigns going within Headley Impact. And again, it's all about, how you can help your fellow neighbor or stranger or friend or whatnot. I think in this world with so many things going crazy and, honestly, it's really hard for me because I am a television producer and I love television. I have a hard time watching the news right now because I absorb everything and I worry about people that I don't even know all the way around the world. And if you told me Martians landed yesterday, I'd be like, what? They did? Because a lot of times I have to block the news out because I just feel like I'm at a point in my life where I carry everything. I mean, just the amount of weight of carrying this Iowa storm is really hard, and you think that there are people around the world going through so many emotionally draining, physically exhausting, heartbreaking, way beyond anything that I've ever experienced in my life. But I just feel like giving back when you can, even if you don't, to a stranger. I mean, even if you can just smile at somebody walking down the street. I mean,
I think I talked about this with Carrie Lloyd, who we talked to as well, where.
Oh, I love Carrie.
Yeah, she's awesome. That was such a great conversation. But I think it's the same. What we talked about is, again, and I just said this, but where it's everybody carries around their own weight and you have your own things that you're dealing with. And so sometimes you hear about these huge problems like orphans in the world. Mm-hmm. This is a problem that your mind, it can't take it on. Sometimes you're just like, there's nothing, but that's what I love the, and maybe it's not, I don't know, maybe it's something that's been done a lot, but this 100% participation, it allows you, again, even if you just go on there and create a group and you give $1, you at least check that box emotionally and in your head to say, look, I'm doing something to help and I'm able to participate in something bigger than myself, which when obviously I think we find the greatest joy when we're looking outside of ourselves and helping other people. Right. So I think, anyways, I love what they're doing. And Absolutely. It is, Josh Steimley, who's my co-host on the podcast. Normally I'm doing this little mini series, by myself working with Lindsay on it, but he's adopted multiple children, one from China, one here in the US. Nice. I've got nieces and nephews that are adopted. And so it's something that's near and dear, and I've seen the blessings that can come from it. And I'm excited for everybody to, that's listening to this to go contribute.
Absolutely. It's wonderful. And I can find out more too, if you go to orphanmyth.org.
For sure.
you can find that. And it's just, it's amazing. And in this day of social media, it's so much easier, to help. I mean, a post means the world, pass it on. You never know who you might be, sharing something with. It's like, I am in the position to adopt a child. I did not know that there were so many children in the United States whose, parental rights have been terminated or whatnot, and they are ready for a home, as soon as someone can take them in, so it's a really amazing thing. And, I'm so honored for this time and for you. I feel bad. I don't know how you're going to edit this. We've been talking for 2 hours.
Let's go another hour.
I put you in a nightmare position of like how you're going to edit this show.
Tom,
My apologies.
Shout out to Tom, producer extraordinaire behind the scenes.
Yeah. Shout out to Tom. Props to Tom. And I'm honored. And, I thank you for dealing with my tired ADD brain this morning. And it's really been a pleasure. And, I wish you the best of luck.
Seriously have, and again, I can say this objectively, and you are incredible. You have done amazing things, and you really should write a book. You really should say, I'm going to sit down, and maybe you have, and I'm going to just write down some sort of flow chart of how this is all panned out, because those are the greatest books, right? Is those memoirs or whatever, where you can read and you can say, you learn that, again, that through line lesson of like perseverance and, endurance and grit and all these things. But then when you can, you've given us like a small taste of some of the hundreds and hundreds of stories that you have, but when you can sprinkle in all of these really fun stories of, oh yeah, and then I did this. Oh yeah, what was like meeting this person.
You're going to be my book editor when I.
You know a lot of really good book editors, but Josh is a published author, and he has a company called Published Author. And
nice. So I know I need to just sit myself down and do it. I always feel like it's so much easier for me to do things for other people than it is for myself. So I put myself on the back burner, but I keep thinking about it too. I'm like, I have all these stories in my head that if nobody else, my nieces and my niece and nephews might think
posterity.
Cool someday, or whatever. But I don't, it's hard because I have a really hard time. When I first started working for Oprah, I'd come home and everybody like 1,000 questions. And I'm like, oh. And then, people would be like, I heard this. I heard she has this. I heard she does this. I heard she traveled here. And I'm like, you seem to know more about her than I do. I don't know. Like, I'm doing my job. I'm like, whatever. So I find it hard to, I don't know, like, I love to tell stories because I think they make people happy, but I also have a hard time, I say, like tooting my own horn or something. Yeah. Like I'm very
back where we started.
I know, like that's why I have a hard time posting pictures sometimes. Cause I'm like, I look at my phone and like, I don't want people going, okay.
Well, I'll tell you this right now. And I struggle with the same, we'll call it, I'm not going to project this on you, but I'll speak for myself when I call it an insecurity of like, nobody cares. Yeah. Nobody cares what I'm doing. Right.
Yeah.
Just next time you're thinking that, I'm going to follow you on, I think I actually already followed you this morning on Twitter. Are you on Instagram too?
Yeah, I don't tweet too much. I tweeted last night about the storm and whatnot. Instagram is kind of my thing.
All right. So I'm going to get you on Instagram. And so next time you're thinking about posting, nobody cares, just know that I care, and I will be super stoked on the other side when I see it. So that now you don't have to think about anybody else. It's much smaller. It's just, hey, Corey is going to really enjoy this.
I love it, Corey.
Okay, well, you are awesome, and everybody go check out orphanmyth.org and continue to listen. We have other conversations coming soon about Orphan Myth. And thank you so much, Shantel. It is an absolute pleasure to meet you.
It's a pleasure. Pleasure coming to you from Iowa. Bye.
Hello, it's Corey here, and I just want to thank you so much for listening into the Hope Strategy Podcast. I hope you're enjoying it as much as we are enjoying having these amazing conversations with these incredible individuals talking about hope. We'd love it if you wouldn't mind liking, subscribing, and leaving us a review on iTunes or Spotify or anywhere that you listen to your podcasts, and share it with anybody you feel that can benefit from these messages of hope. Thank you so much for listening to the Hope Strategy Podcast.